Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our weekly Improving Talk session. We are very excited to embark on a brand new series called Growth Culture at Improving with Leadership from our company. My name is Armando Lopez, and I am thrilled to welcome you today. But now let's talk a little bit about the man of the hour, Curtis Hite, CEO of Improving. He began his career as a software engineer building systems in the defense industry. In early 2007, Curtis and a group of partners established the Blue Ocean Group, which quickly acquired a small training company called Improving Enterprises and adopted the Improving name. The company has been blessed with continued growth ever since then, repeatedly receiving accolades including the Inc. 500 5000, Dallas 100, Aggie 100, among many others. I am very honored to welcome him today with his webinar, Embracing Lifelong Learning for Personal and Professional Success, where he will share with all of us his insights on fostering a growth mindset and creating an integrated life. Pretty cool, right? But before we start, I encourage you to use our Q&A feature so you can ask Curtis any questions during his webinar, and we will make sure, and I'll make sure to get them. And now I leave you with Curtis Hite. The microphone is yours.
Thank you, Armando. I'm very excited to be here today. It's a topic that I'm very passionate about. I actually found out that this presentation is not only inside Improving, but includes people that are outside our organization. So welcome. I do want to talk a little bit about the format as well. It's a format that I use for our internal executive development program. I am pulling slides to get the content I want, and it's really focused more on the content than how the slides particularly look or feel. That's not an excuse. It just allows us to really facilitate the discussions that we would like to have. And today, that discussion's about lifelong learning. I want to start that off with a quote here. This is from Abigail Adams, who was the first lady in the late 1700s and early 1800s. Learning is not attained by chance. It must be sought with ardor and attended with diligence. The key words being ardor, enthusiasm and passion, and diligence. And diligence is defined as a careful and a persistent effort. And I think this is really important when we explore this topic today, because I believe that a lot of people aspire to lifelong learning. They aspire to their own personal development, but without the passion and enthusiasm, without the careful and deliberate and the persistent diligence, it doesn't happen. So when we are talking about this inside of Improving, we really focus on these two items. I'm going to put a little bit of context here. Some of the key concepts and objectives I would love for each of you to get out of this. From an objectives here, 1 to 2 ideas you might take away today, right? And that might be impactful. And possibly 1 to 2 practices, more than ideas. Really, how do you put this into practice? What might you do becomes very important to me. And to give you an active example of what lifelong learning might look like. I do not believe this is the example. I don't believe it's the only thing you can do, but it is something that I have done that has worked for me and generated a fair degree of success. Some of the concepts and contexts here, really understanding the difference between acquired knowledge and adaptive learning. I'll explain what that is. It's I think, a significant difference here. That words actually matter, especially to yourself, and they guide us in a good direction or possibly in the wrong direction. This goes along with vision is our North Star. This is where we get our direction from. Understanding the difference between work-life balance and what I believe is a far superior concept of an integrated life. And then the importance around deliberate practice. And finally, and this is the only place I address this in the whole presentation, but learning and development are our own responsibilities. As I've experienced over the last 30 years, the people that are most successful in their personal lives and their professional lives do not leave this to somebody else. Do not expect somebody else to do this for them. And this is probably one of the biggest and most repeatable concepts that I've observed while looking at people out there and how they attribute their own success. And again, I'm not talking just professional, I'm talking personal as well. They take this very seriously. They're not waiting for somebody else to define this for them, nor are they waiting for somebody else to give them time to do so. So these are some of the key concepts and objectives. And I am going to start with this difference between adaptive and acquired learning. When you are reading books, most people focus their learning in this concept of horizontal development. I'm going to read a book and get more understanding. I'm going to attend a talk and try to learn some new knowledge. This is very good, and this can give us breadth, and breadth has a lot of value in this world. But there is something that's called adaptive learning. And that's on the right. This is about vertical development. This is about changing your meaning-making system, how you think about things, not what you think or the knowledge you contain, but literally how you make meaning of the world. And this type of learning, often called development, just straight out development, is really a very complex idea, and it's very hard to attain because it often results in true transformation. It's so difficult that many studies say that less than 3% of the population will ever vertically develop unless they have some outside life event or some outside trauma that really leads them in this direction, because it is very difficult. This is an entire, inside of improving, this is an entire concept that we can spend weeks on understanding the difference and the importance of what is on the right. Today, some of the things we will talk about is about the vertical development. Both of them need deliberate practice, as I mentioned earlier, but just think one changes your meaning making, how you think about, how you perceive things. That is the adaptive learning. Acquired learning is really looking at the information that you contain. Some people really put book smarts in the left, and they will put EQ or street smarts on the right. That's an okay generalization, but it is not perfect in every case. The next point of context I want to have is we really need to choose our words very wisely. I'm going to give a few examples of how important this may be, because they shape our reality. They shape our focus. They shape our vision. And this is very, very important, because what I'm saying here is not to make some political point, but to demonstrate the power of words. Social distancing was something we are all familiar with that showed up back in 2020. And I believe, and I think everybody would agree, that there was a whole lot of good intent around this. But we as an entire world were told to socially distance. And when you look at the National Library of Medicine here, but many other studies, what we did was we leaned into this, and it led to anxiety, acute stress, this intrusive thoughts. And it really has been persistent since we continue to do that. My theory, my hypothesis is we were doing what we were told to do, socially distance. But imagine if what we were told to do was physically distance while socially connecting. That's a very different objective. That's a very different North Star. Would we have had as much of this anxiety and acute stress? Certainly we would have had more because of COVID and things like that. But people did what they were told, socially distance, and that was really not what's meant. Good intent, but maybe a consequence of something, an undesired consequence. I believe, and again, not to be controversial, but work-life balance falls into this exact same case. Great intent, great ideas, but it has some unintended subconscious consequence. First of all, when we think of balance, we think of an equilibrium, an equal distribution of weight or of an amount. This comes straight from dictionary.com. So when we say work-life balance, is that what we really want? A state of equilibrium between work and life? Is this actually misleading us? Without, again, wait for the punchline, because I'm not saying the concepts behind work-life balance are bad. I'm saying the words are carefully chosen, right? If we want an equilibrium between these two, there's 168 hours per week, right? If we get 7 hours of sleep, which is the average hours we get in a night, that leaves 127 remaining hours for work and life. If we want to have work-life balance, that means 63 and a half hours of life and 63 and a half hours of work. Guess what? If we're really seeking balance, we need to be working more. But that doesn't sound right. What it is we have this concept of set of words that might create some dissonance in us because we're trying to follow them. Wow. The other thing that is important is that it creates a good versus bad feeling, often polarizing here. Work is bad, life is good. Is that really the case? Is one bad? Is one good? Right? It creates a zero-sum game as well. Not only good and bad, but there's a concept that it's either work or life. All of these things are very misleading. The thesis here is that work is a single aspect of a potentially very rich life. It is a part of life. It is not one or the other. It is not good or bad. It is not, how does something get balanced when it's a part of itself? So some people may also argue, and there's meaning to these categories at the bottom here, but they're different aspects of life, right? In a very potentially rich life. Everything from potentially spirituality or faith, your own learning and growth, or your family, your friends, maybe your love, maybe finance and health and lifestyle and work. These are all different aspects of your life, which you'll hear a little bit about later. Well, if we want balance between work and life, it means 63 and a half hours of work. And wait a second, 63 and a half hours for all these other items? How am I ever going to, that doesn't sound right either. Let's take another look at this. Well, what happens if all of these are equal and balanced? It means 14 hours of work, 14 hours of health, 14 hours of finance. That doesn't seem right. Instead, what I propose is a concept that is an integrated life. That the more we find ways to integrate our life is the more we are in a state of gratitude, appreciation, and driving value into our own lives. Note, this is also very different than work-life integration. This is integrated life. Work is simply a part of that. This is a very important concept, I believe, in understanding a path to lifelong development and learning. Is life includes all of these things. When we're learning and developing, where are we developing? It's not just about work, but what are we doing in our families to learn? How are we developing ourselves to love more deeply? Maybe more people as well. My last thing on work, and it's actually not my last thing on work. Is work actually bad or work good? Let's talk about that myth a little bit. It's really interesting when you look up and do Google searches of the value of work. You will find that there is immense value to this. So suggesting that one is good, life, and work is bad, again, sends a subconscious a message that may not be accurate. Of course, it provides a paycheck, but it also gives us a sense of identity. How many of you, when say, hey, tell me a little bit about yourself, many of us start with work. Other people will quickly get to work. We learn things. We get to meet new people. We have meaning and purpose. There's a self-esteem to having jobs for many people. There are studies that show about the mental health. We're making a difference, leading a life that counts, their self-respect, their social status for some people in this area. Overall, the point here is not that work is great, that work is the end all, that we need to follow this. That's not the point I'm making. The point is, let's be careful with our words. And let's understand that work is not bad. Work is simply a part of a highly integrated life. One other concept is something that I call a life hour. A life hour is an hour of time where we derive some value in an aspect of our life. And we can define what aspects in our life are important. You saw some of the ones that I believe are important. I have 10 life areas that I believe are important in my particular life. So if I spend 1 hour of time with friends, I get one friend life hour there. I spent quality time with a friend. But 1 hour of time may actually include multiple life hours, right? As an example, I could go to the gym. And if I go to the gym, I might be improving my health. I might even be improving my lifestyle because it bleeds over into other things in the long run. But what if I intentionally also chose to go to the gym with a friend? The next thing I've done is I've created 3 life hours. I've created 3 hours of value in different areas of my life by very consciously, very mindfully choosing my activities. The only thing I did here was choose to go with a friend versus choosing to go alone. This intentionality can bring more value into our lives. Robin Fuentes one time was visiting in Dallas. It was a nice day out. She wanted to have a meeting. The meeting, and we were scheduled for it. We did not need a whiteboard for that meeting. She asked me, hey, do you want to go on a walk outside while we do this meeting? I thought it was very clever. I recognized what I was doing. It was about a 20-minute meeting. There's some irony there. I still remember the topic of that meeting because it was such a different idea, not the topic, but for me, having a walking meeting on a beautiful day. And we walked around the back parking lot. It was really a conscious act. When you're coming to the office and you're having in-person meetings like that, you can make that decision. Interestingly enough, I consider Robin a friend. So I have a single meeting that is accomplishing a work objective, and you'll get into this a little bit later. Because I'm working, I'm also accomplishing a financial objective. Because I am walking, I am creating and living into my health objective. And because I'm with a friend, I am also making one of my social objectives. I am gaining 4 life hours out of a single hour of time. We can stand at work. I've seen people do walking things, and you can't do that in the office. We have desks you can stand at, but I don't believe we don't have walking machines at work. I do know that the second example of this, the office can sometimes help with this by planning activities around different events, different group activities in our come-togethers, things that are maybe more healthy. With intentionality, with consciousness, we can add these value hours, and Robin was a perfect example of that. I'll go back to this question. Why is this so important? We're talking about learning and growth, but we as people, we gravitate to those areas of life that provide us the most value. We really do. And not all of these, each person is going to have, these are not equally weighted in value. I'm just going to say we gravitate to those things that add us the most value. But the more value we can clump together, no matter how they are weighted, creates a better life experience. Because, again, a lot of studies, people who experience a lot of value in their life tend to be more grateful, tend to be happier. And the key here is with intentionality, anybody can do this. We really can. So some people say, oh, you're a workaholic. Maybe. I'm not. I don't believe I am. And I think most people that know me well would understand I probably live a highly integrated life. But I do understand if you accept the premise that people are going to gravitate to the areas of life that add them the most value. When we work, you are almost always attaching at least two, if not three or four different areas of life that you're gaining value from. Often people, if they're working, are learning. You're gaining experience, even if you're not gaining adaptive. When you are in a situation, let's say even a tense situation with a person, you gain the opportunity to learn how to address a tense situation if you are in a curious, mindful view. Every opportunity is almost an opportunity for learning and growth. We're also earning money, and for a lot of people, finance is a huge objective. When we work with people we consider a friend, not only are we, I saw this at an Inc. 5000 event, going to be up to 3 times more productive than those people that don't work with friends, right? But we might be touching a social area of life value. Therefore, work is going to very naturally integrate 2, 3, 4, or 5 of these aspects of our life. It's just a very natural gravitation. I'm going to conclude this section, which you will also see later, with a quote, because this is a quote that guides my own life. The master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind and his body, his information and his recreation, his love, his religion. He hardly knows which of these is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving others to decide whether he's working or playing. To him, he's always doing both. I feel I live this almost every day. I don't worry about what other people are thinking. I have a very integrated life. I've had an integrated life since a young age. I didn't call it at that. I found that when I was pursuing this concept of work-life balance, that I would end up in places I didn't want to be. But when I followed the concept of integrated life, it was truer to what I wanted for my own life. All of that is context to be talking about this lifelong learning. How do we do some of this? And I think you really have to provide 3 high-level aspects into lifelong learning. First is vision, second is focus, and third is intentionality. Vision provides where we are headed in our life. Focus provides us with priority, and emphasis and simplicity. We cannot do everything. So where do we focus? And intentionality is about the goals, the objectives, the actions that we're seriously committed to. Let me talk a little bit about vision, and then I'm going into Lifebook, but an important part of vision. In the executive courses that I've facilitated, and these are usually year-long to 2-year-long courses for our executives, at the very beginning, we talk about vision. It is very hard without intentionality for the people I've done this exercise with to articulate any significant vision in their life. And it's a sad concept to me. The biggest vision that I hear, the most common vision that I hear is, I want to become financially independent so I can do X, Y, Z. It is some vision, but that's a very limited vision, right? And it doesn't guide us. Vision is meant to guide our direction. If we have a point we're going towards and we're here, it guides us, maybe not in a straight line. But if you don't have a very well articulated vision, you could end up anywhere around your starting point. You can end up in the wrong direction. You could be the opposite direction. You could be one that's counter to what, because people do not give thought to the real direction in their life. And vision provides you the guidelines to say, I am taking a step in a direction that's not in one of my espoused areas of either development or places I want to be. Because we can't do everything, that's the focus concept we really need to prioritize as well. And finally, I want to talk about intentionality. One concept here, I hear this all the time. A lot of people claim they want to be a lifelong learner. A lot of people claim they want to personally develop. But what I can tell you is, while these people are sincere, they have that espouse, that aspirational value, they are not serious about it. Because when people are serious, things happen. The most common area I see this in is health aspects. People have a vision. It might be better, more exercise. It might be eat better. It might be, I'm going to lose weight. They are very sincere. They're not lying. In fact, I hardly know a person that does not have that goal. What I can tell you is they're not serious about it. Because if they were serious, it would get done. Now, of course, there are medical conditions and things that might interfere. I'm not talking about that. So when there is a dissonance between what somebody says they want, an espoused value, an espoused vision, and where they are acting, the behaviors or actions, my premise is there is something you value more in between. And that's where it might be something as simpler as you value comfort. And therefore, I value comfort more. Therefore, I choose the comfort path. And therefore, I don't meet my espoused value. Very, very important concepts here. Work-life balance, to me, is, again, a concept that I try to avoid. I try to look at an integrated life. And I don't try to put an arbitrary time frame on that life. If we put it in a 5-day week, a 7, how about a month? How about a year? Okay. The smaller the time period we make, the more of the arbitrary constraint that we're putting on something. My daughter has had to have some brain surgeries, 2 of them this year. Do you know how much balance I had in my life during the periods that I was with her? Almost none. There was no balance. That wasn't the goal. My priority was with my daughter at the Mayo Clinic. I was there all in with her. all going through this experience with her. So to think about balance limits our perspective. And I want to encourage, think about an integrated life. At certain times, I took my work vacation to be with my daughter, and I'm perfectly happy doing that because that's where the priority needed to be in my life. At other times, I may need to put that priority in the career because career, as I mentioned, is very tightly coupled with somebody's financial aspects of their life, and they may have different goals in these things. What I encourage is that this is more of a fluid concept, and it's over a broader period of time than trying to limit to a week or not. One danger, and today I am a single father. Okay. I always wasn't that way. When I was married and with my kids on a daily basis, I constantly told myself, not constantly, but regularly, oh, I'll do that tomorrow. I'll do that tomorrow. When my kids were not with me all of the time, I realized how much of a story that was I was telling myself. Because I didn't have tomorrow all the time. I had these 4 days. And starting to understand that, you know what, these 3 days are going to be all work. But these 4 days I'm going to overemphasize my family. And what I found was I became happier. I developed a really, my relationship with my kids is very, very good. And I learned this concept about focus and priority at different times, giving myself the grace. Yep, sometimes it's work, and sometimes it's work from 6 a.m. till 9 p.m. But there were other days where I said, once I am with my children, it is all in. There's nothing else that's going to distract me from it and nothing that's going to get in the way. And this fluid perspective tended to serve me better. And I'm going back to one more concept that I presented at I am giving an example that works for me. It does not mean that this example is going to work for everybody. I am not that arrogant or righteous to think that. This is an example that works for a person. That person happens to be me. But I do believe that I've seen enough other people adopt different practices, different ideas from this, and I see their life start to transform, that I do believe there is something good here. I'm going to get into the concept of Lifebook now, which somebody else mentioned earlier. What is a Lifebook? There's so much tied to this concept of integrated life to the concept of Lifebook. For me, that is true. For me, a Lifebook includes these things on the left of your screen. What I've done is looked at the 10 aspects of my life that I have chosen to delineate. They can vary from person to person. You saw them on the screens at the earliest aspects of this presentation. But I discuss my context, my beliefs first around these things. This is my worldview. It's going to be very hard to change these things, but not impossible. And I need to be aware of those things inside of me. So I start there, my belief, whether it's about lifestyle, which is this green Lifebook, or this kind of peach or whatever color I've made that mauve. Okay, that is my family Lifebook. When we go into purple, that's my spirituality, or yeah. And then when I go into green over here, that's my financial, and that's a story. Blue is career. These are examples of the Lifebook. But once I have this context and beliefs in each of these areas, I then create a 20-year vision. It's usually a paragraph or two. It's written in the present context. I put myself 20 years from now and I write what my life looks like in my best form of that area. The next thing I do is After I have that 20-year vision, I create this 5-year vision. Okay, has to be aligned with that direction. It doesn't have to be a straight line, but it has to be aligned. I'm going in that direction. This forces me to prioritize. And I write something very similar in the context of the 20-year vision. What does my 5-year look like? There's a 1-year goal section in each of these. You're going to see forms of this in a slide or two. Then I state 90-day objectives. And in something I talk about, walk the talk, I want to put my behaviors where my espoused values are. Every single Monday, I look at these 10 areas of my life and I trace my weekly actions all the way to my 20-year visions. This is a lot. I understand this. I would not recommend starting here. This has been a 13-year journey that I have now done this, but I did not start with this elaborate of a system. And I'll give some hints on where to start because I have a start small and evolve. Start small and evolve. Otherwise, this becomes overwhelming. But I want to give a picture of what it might be, what it could be for those that like this idea. Now we're getting into a lot more detail here. I have these aspects of my life: family, love, friends, learning and growth, right? Health. And at the beginning of the year, I actually every quarter do this, but I take a personal 3-day retreat. And some people may say, I don't have time. I'm simply going to say, you don't make it a priority. That's it. Time is an excuse for everybody because we always have time for the most important things in our life. For me, I deem this as important. I spend 3 days with myself alone and isolated. And at the beginning of the year, I review all of my 20, my 5, my 1. I restate my 1 for that year. I come up with a strategy for each of these. For spirituality, that, as you can see here, I wanted a plateau of slow growth with maybe a minor new plateau in here. Learning and growth, what you can back on track, I had slid. And I had been on this plateau of slow growth, but throughout the year in my evaluation, I had slid. So I wanted to be back on track. That's a strategy. In the area of love, I wanted some minor and major milestones. I really have 4 categories of relationships: love, my immediate family, my extended family, my social, and my friends. But you can see they might have different strategies for each of them. I won't go through each of these here, but these, and the one that I've added is quite an interesting one, something I call the mundane, but it's a very important part of my life that I need to pay attention to. Then, without going into a lot, you see these strategies on the bottom left. You can see them on the far left of this graph. I then have 1-year goals in every aspect of my life. The next is my 90-day goal. The next column, which is the one that looks to be in the middle, is my next minimum step to make progress. On the right-hand side, it's the last step I did to make any progress. And then what you're seeing on the far right is at the end of the quarter, I evaluate on a scale of -5 to +5 how well I did in this area of my life. And of course, in this example, I'm going to give you the one that shows all the green because that's my own shame coming. I don't want to show you one that has a lot of red and showing where I'm failing. Just a little bit of vulnerability here. I put on one of my better quarters, better 90-day periods. But you can see I'm making progress in the vast majority of these by following this system. This is very deliberate practice. This practice started in 2010, and it's evolved, and it's something that I do weekly, quarterly, yearly, even revisiting these life books and vision. One thing I want to talk about vision. When you create a vision for your life, don't hold your vision tightly. You don't leave yourself room for new factors to come in and adjust. But don't hold it so loosely that your vision's meaningless either. You let new things come in and you don't pursue that. So this is what I do. This is the lifelong learning. For me, it's a 13-year. I used to learn, but not this deliberately, not with this much passion, not with this much direction. And if you were to see over the 13, imagine I am in the middle of my third set of 5-year visions. I am coming towards the middle of my 20-year visions. Interestingly enough, over half of my 20-year visions have been met now because I was always moving not in a straight line, but at least in the general direction as I tried to integrate these different areas of my life, not worrying about the concept of balance at any given moment, but looking at the bigger picture saying, am I able to integrate these things, prioritize and focus at different times in different ways so that overall I'm moving in the right direction? This is the walk the talk process. I did not put this. It would have been too vulnerable for me to make it. Sorry, I was not that. But you can see that each of the 10 areas of my life are here. On a weekly basis, the first thing I do is reflect in a particular area. Then after that reflection, I make commitments. These are my success criteria. It took me years to get this right. Most of the time I was putting in goals or stretch goals that I wanted to do and I wasn't reaching them. No, this is a binary. I'm either successful or I'm unsuccessful on a week by week basis. It's 0-1. Then I put another category, which are goals. It is things I'm mentioning I'm strongly committed to, but we'll see, because they don't determine success or not for the week. Finally, they're stretch, but then I might put notes in there. I might have additional ideas or things for consideration. I do this every single week for everyone. I review my life area. You ask, how much time does this take? Once you're in a rhythm, this takes me anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour. It happens Monday morning at around 6:30 a.m. every morning. This is making sure that I am walking in my espoused directions, in my espoused visions and values. And this is what I do to continue down this path of lifelong development, learning to love better, learning to be a better friend while actually meeting my objectives. So where do we get started? These are big concepts. This is a journey I could take people on. We spend, when I'm facilitating, about 13 weeks just on these slides here. And that's just the start. So if that's the tip of the iceberg, what we were talking about or reflecting on today is the tip of the iceberg. I would say start with this. Consider a retreat weekend. Sometimes this is hard to prioritize. Well, what about my family? What about my family has so much better benefited because I do this on a 90-day basis, not just but start with one where you reflect on these things in your life. If you have people, you can share some of these aspirations that are close so that you can see. Don't start with 10 aspects of life. I'm going to actually say, which 3 are you going to start with? That's what I did. If you look at 2010, and it was 3 aspects of my life only. It wasn't too overwhelming. The people that know me closely know that 13 years ago, I went through a divorce. There was a lot of shame. There was a lot of guilt associated with that. Now, do you remember what I discussed at the very first slide of this presentation about adaptive learning, the way I see the world? So, in a lot of pain for everybody, not just me, my children, my ex-spouse, my family that lives around me, my own shame, like I mentioned, I said 3% of the populace ever makes a meaningful change around how they view life and how they see life without trauma. I had trauma. And now I'm not suggesting that everybody needs to go create trauma in their life. That's not good. But I did capitalize on that trauma. Today, what I can say is I am transforming. Because of that trauma, I transformed then with a different worldview. But today I am transforming myself without the trauma. And I do this because of this practice. So as much as I would love to say I was super strong, it wasn't in a moment of strength that I did this. It was in a moment of vulnerability and weakness that saw that shift. That is not coincidental. But what I'm trying to do here, and I've seen other people do this, is give these points to start small and evolve. If you did this one retreat weekend, see where it leads you. Don't hold it tightly, hold it loosely. Identify these 4 aspects in your life. So many people think about their career development that maybe you don't do that one at first, because there's some attention you may be already doing this. I know at Improving, a lot of us go with path. Most of us are using path to talk about our professional career. I would encourage you to use path to talk about the other aspects of your life. These tend to be good ones. Family, just one aspect of family, maybe not immediate or extended. Finance, health, right? These are good ones. Then instead of writing this huge life book, have a life page, just a life page. Bullet point 3 20-year aspirations in each of these lives, in each of these aspects of your life. Then bullet point 3 aligned 5-year aspects, and then 3 important, meaningful goals. We're at New Year's resolution time. What a time to be doing this, right? Every Monday, for all 3 to 5 aspects, review it and declare a baby step. Review it, declare success or failure, forgive yourself of the failures, celebrate your wins, but create one baby step that gets you in the right direction. This is not big. You can start this small. This is the level that I was doing. Bullet points, not full visions. You would be amazed. We do this inside our own company. Our 10-year vision is not arbitrary. Our 3-year vision that fits in the 10-year vision is not arbitrary. Our 1-year vision that fits in the 3-year, that fits in that all the operational units is not. It is actually a derived from this practice. When you write things down, you are 42% more likely to achieve that goal simply by the fact that you wrote it down. That is pretty amazing. You want to put some extra pressure on yourself on your goals? You know what the biggest way, and I don't have the stat, but it literally changes the multiples, is share it with multiple people. And ask them to simply ask how you've done about that. You want to lose 10 pounds. You can write it down, 42% more likely. Share it with people in a public environment. You've increased it by multiples more likely, especially if you're inviting them to ask you. Unfortunately, that psychologically, when you look at that last stat, tends to do with shame. But shame can be a powerful motivator right? Good or bad, it changed my life. But when you share it with people, if you're going to fail, now you are effectively a month later going to be, or however the time frame. But it is a very powerful tool. Not only write them, but maybe share them. For hours outside of work, okay, I'm working, I'm presenting right now. Quite frankly, by presenting, I can assure you I'm learning. I'm learning how to articulate. I've already said some things in my head right now that I am wanting to change the next time. That is a type of learning and growth. I am learning through the experience of communicating here. Outside of the things that I'm learning while doing work, I dedicate every week, this is my goal, no less than 4 hours, 240 minutes of ideal learning hours. I have done this now for, again, 13, 14 years. You would be surprised what 4 ideal hours of true adaptive learning can, and acquired knowledge, can do for you. I don't know what I would do if I was saying 80% of my job is learning. I'm learning while I'm doing this, but I mean true, just dedicated learning and development. I spend 4 hours a week, and they are a good 4 hours, deep journaling, deep reflection, a deep conversation with the person. Sometimes it goes well beyond that. Sometimes I might get 15 hours. I've spent a whole weekend with executives exploring the concept of guilt, shame, embarrassment, and humiliation. I can't tell you how, though, that entire retreat weekend with those executives changed my entire meaning making system on those 4 subjects. So I don't know the answer to 80%. I don't find myself in an environment, and I don't know that. If you're inside the company, I don't know. I'd like to understand that perspective more.
It
But I
says he meant 80% of personal time outside of working hours.
That's a lot of time. I spend 4 hours, and my entire ideal hours, and my entire life has changed because of that. I would ask, are you focused in the acquired knowledge, or are you focused in the adaptive knowledge and learning? Adaptive learning tends to have more impact in the long term. So some tips as I conclude here. Start small. I've already said this. Write these things down. Be super honest with yourself. Super honest. Ask why you've selected your vision. That's very, very important. Let's stop talking about work-life balance. It misleads us. Let's start taking those same concepts, but in the context of integrated life. Work-life balance has great concepts. Let's not the words mislead us subconsciously or consciously. Don't get discouraged when you fail. I failed 52 weeks in a row on one of my Lifebook areas. 52. And it was that 52nd week, which actually, in my own failure, inspired the change by starting much smaller than I ever imagined. And celebrate and reward your success when you even make these small things. All these things make a difference. And I'm going to conclude once more with this because I want this to sink in. This is the integrated life, which includes learning all of the time. But the master in the art of living makes little distinction between his work and his play, his labor and his leisure, his mind, his body, his information, his recreation, his love and his religion. He hardly knows which is which. He simply pursues his vision of excellence at whatever he does, leaving it to others to decide whether he's working or playing, because to him, he's always doing both. This is an integrated life. This is how do we develop ourselves. It is a topic probably something I am so passionate about. I love to spend time with others doing this type of personal work and development. I would love to spend time with other people who want to explore this concept about how to start small, how to elaborate once you have. And that's an open invitation. So I'm going to stop there. I know I'm at the hour, 2 minutes over, but thank you all for attending this conversation.
Right on time, Curtis. And what an awesome message to finish your presentation. I want to thank you all for joining us today, but especially you, Mr. Curtis Hite, for such a great and insightful presentation. And coming up next week, make sure to join us for Mark Lanyon and his webinar, Employee Investment and Growth, on December 11th. You don't want to miss it. Until next time, everyone, have a great rest of your day.